And for our countrymen, welcome to the Meidas Defense Week in Review. I'm your host, Ken Harbaugh, joined by Bobby Jones. Before we get into it, a quick roundup. The Iran war is back on, and Trump's own flip flopping is at the center of it. He threatened Iran with devastating strikes, then backed off. That kind of whiplash from the commander in chief doesn't just confuse the public, it tells adversaries our red lines aren't real. Aboard the USS Lincoln, sailors are grinding through extended deployments with no coherent mission, and across the force, troops who signed up to defend the country are watching a Pentagon that can't tell them why they're out there. That's not a messaging problem, that's a leadership failure, and it's gutting morale and trust in the chain of command. Joining me is Bobby Jones, retired U.S. Navy commander and the voice behind the Anchor Watch Substack. Make sure you subscribe and do it. Bobby, I want to start with that morale question because, look, you and I both know that sailors go through, unpleasant conditions on deployment. They always have, they always will. You and I both did. What strikes me about this saga is that they're talking about it. And that speaks more to a loss of confidence in leadership than sailors whining about conditions. Sailors have always whined amongst themselves about conditions. And I guarantee you, people have suffered more than the sailors on the Lincoln are suffering now, which is inexcusable, but they're talking about it to the press. And that's something I think non-military people need to understand the severity of.
It's huge, and I've thought about, okay, so why are people speaking up? There's two major things that I think is happening. Number one, for the 251 plus years that the United States Navy has deployed and done this, there was always this understanding as to why you're doing it. When I was on USS Anzio as the second in command, we had our deployment to the Middle East extended twice, but we understood why. There had been a carrier gap. No American forces were there for 9 months. All sorts of things were happening. We needed to stay at that point. We understood why. And so sailors can digest damn near anything if they understand the rationale behind it. And it's explained. This never happened. This never happened. And so that leads to point number two. The families, the support structure that exists where sailors are able to deploy have been left out of the loop, and they feel as though their opinions don't matter, that their concerns don't matter. When you send and mail a care package to a sailor on a ship and it finally gets there after 3 weeks, a month, however long it takes, it's not just about giving them something that they want to try to provide some small comfort. It's also a confirmation that their sailor is okay and that they are being supportive. And this is the aspect that I think Hegseth in particular and his cronies do not understand. Whenever you deploy service members into harm's way, we'll do it. But the families want to know that, hey, it matters what they're doing and that their support is being felt by their service member. This is not happening at all. As a matter of fact, the exact opposite. When you sit there and you have 18 KIAs killed in action and you want to reclassify some of them because the numbers don't look good politically for you, that is the exact antithesis of what he should be doing. And you're getting reports now, finally, that's been happening in the background, but now being vocal that the generals and admirals at the Department of Defense have had enough. They know that their advice has been ignored. They know the professionals that know how to do the job have been removed, and the cronies are being promoted. And this is all having a catastrophic effect on morale. They will sit there, Ken, and tell you, well, our retention numbers are high and our recruiting numbers are high because of the patriotism of Trump. No, bullshit. It's because of the crappy economy that you have created, and people can't afford basic health care and things like that. So they're rolling into the military to get the basics. That's the true reason this is happening. So you're looking at a strategic failure militarily that is now spilled into, in my humble opinion, the civilian community, where people are having to serve because they see no other way and no other option in an all-volunteer force. And the families themselves feel like they are completely being ignored and let out the loop. I mean, families are saying, and speaking up, Ken, and their names are attached to it. They no longer
Yeah.
care.
Yeah. I got to believe that this growing chorus of concern and complaint from the families. They're leading it. It's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I've never seen anything like it, but I do talk to some off the record about how bad things are, and I think it's only going to get worse
Yep.
for the Department of Defense, for the president. Once the dam breaks, I think we're going to be hearing from hundreds, if not thousands, of service members and family members because they've lost respect for the secretary and to some
Yes.
degree the president. And look, Pete Hegseth uh, can prune, can cull all of the senior admirals and generals he wants. There are enough of them to get through, but he can't weed out every sergeant or master chief or
No, 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 no.
seaman. Yeah,
And what he's trying to do by the removal of flag officers being generals and admirals, right? He's trying to create and I've said this before, this politic that the Soviet Union military had, a bunch of politically aligned officers that sucked at the military aspect, but were going to keep the Communist Manifesto and everything influencing their armed forces. That's what he wants. That's what he's done with the press, removing them. All of that. We've seen the movie before. How did it work out for the Soviet Union? It was crap, right? And so now we got this TMU version of it trying to be implemented in the Pentagon. And the resistance is not just fierce, it's being felt. If you don't think firing General Donahue, a former Delta Force commander, does not have a ripple effect for the actual real warriors in the United States military, you have lost your mind. But because he's the real deal, and Hegseth wants a 1980s B movie action film star to just parrot stuff that sounds tough, this is what you're happening. You're firing competence, promoting lackeyism, and how's that working? You don't even have enough munitions to conduct a war. And when you do conduct it, your logistics, which is where wars are won, are absolute trash. Your security has gone through the wayside. And America's allies realize for the first time since becoming a superpower, we cannot rely on the United States. Good job, Pete. And it's all on you. And the thing that I would tell people too, as soon as I saw the munitions report and those guys were arguing at Camp David, I said, start the clock. Hegseth's going to be the one thrown under the bus, and it's already started.
it's already happening. I want to talk about that munition shortage, but I I first want to highlight your comparison to the Soviet Union and
Mm-hmm.
just provide a little historical lesson for this
Mm-hmm.
audience that every major command in the Soviet military had a political officer, someone
Bingo.
who didn't do anything except make sure people were thinking the right way. And anyone who
Exactly.
stepped out of line, including the commander of that unit, was actually subordinate in terms of ideology to the
Yep.
political officer. Political officer might have no strategic competency, might have no tactical ability, might not even know how to fire a weapon, but he understood the Communist Manifesto and the party
Right.
priorities, and he could have a commander sent to the gulag for wrong thinking. And I don't think we're going to get that far, but you already see the signs of it in the DEI purges, in the fact that women now represent the
Mm-hmm.
lowest share of promotion recommendations than at any time since these numbers have been tracked, 4%.
Yep.
Pete Hegseth is purging anyone that he can get his hands on who he
Yep.
thinks doesn't think the right way. And it is, I mean, the echoes of Stalinism are impossible to ignore.
I cannot stress to you how dangerous this is, because he's breaking this down in a few months, and it's going to take years to
Yeah.
restore that competency level. And the bottom line is, if you look at this from an objective standpoint, it makes zero sense. But if you look at it from, and this is very key, a white Christian nationalist standpoint, where that's his church, literally his pastor has espoused these views, it all makes total sense. But here's the problem with that, Ken. You can pray all you want to white Jesus in the Middle East when these drones are coming down. If you don't have the munitions to knock it down, you're going to go see Jesus or whatever deity that you pray to because of this stupid ideology. It is not a coincidence. The second you go out of your way to remove candidates and commanders that have diverse backgrounds, which means here's the thing, diverse thoughts and perspectives on how to look at a situation, that's your military effectiveness falls off of a cliff. Okay. We learned these lessons the hard way, going back specifically to World War II, where they were like, oh my gosh, those black guys know how to fly planes, or those Asian guys know how to take a hill. We learned these lessons. And instead of continuing to add to the tapestry of that experience, this guy's stripping it bare. And this is what you get. I'm not the one that makes these policies, but I am the one watching and judging the military's performance right now, and it is trash.
Yeah.
Trash compared to what it was just 3 years ago.
We're getting some great comments in the chat. Robert pointing out that Hegseth is the epitomization of a DEI hire. I
Yes.
guess Trump thought there weren't enough crusaders and white supremacists or Christian nationalists in the department, so he put one in charge of it. Linda, I'm going to get to your question if we have time. It's the elephant in the room. Would Trump use nukes? But we'll work up to it, Bobby, because I got to ask you about the missile defense gap and just the idiotic way this administration has deployed these prestige interceptors. And if I'm not mistaken, you were part of the Missile Defense Agency at one point. You understand this intimately.
Yes, I do. And I'm going to address that. I want to address something that Mike Gobby threw in here. He's talking about when religions calls for death of infidels, it is still a religion protected by the Constitution. Let me be very clear to you, Mike, about something. Okay. I have been, as a black guy growing up in the Deep South, I've seen a lot of Christians do things to people who look like me and beyond. And historically speaking, selling my ancestors away under the veil of Christianity. Stop. Stop it with that. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your background is. If you identify with the Constitution of the United States and what you should want to defend and fight for, that's it. Full stop. We're not going to play this religion, pick a sect and say this, that, and the other. This is ridiculous because guess what? If you did that, you wouldn't have a United States military today. Now, to your question, Ken, let me be very clear on this. This was seen coming miles and miles away. The United States Central Command has war games that go on throughout the year where, hey, we're trying to figure out what happens if we do A, B, C, and D in the region. United States, the president of the United States has access to that information. But most importantly, Pete Hegseth not only has access to that information, he's the one that calls for those war games as Secretary of Defense. And I worked at the Missile Defense Agency for CENTCOM. I know what we knew. And they chose to ignore it because, and this goes back to sort of the mindset that Mr. Godby just shared in the chat, this arrogant mentality of we're better than you, or these people believe this, and so therefore we will scare them. Complete miscalculations. It is the same thing the United States did before World War II, where they believed the Japanese could not bomb Pearl Harbor because their eyes were too close together. They literally put that in a report. What happened? Pearl Harbor got blown to bits because of this arrogance, this racial-based arrogance. With Hegseth, I definitely believe it's the same mindset because how is it you do Operation Midnight Hammer, whatever you say, they are able to reconstitute quickly like that. You have people around you, other organizations intel-wise outside the United States saying, this is going to be a problem if y'all keep this up. They were forewarned about all of this from within the United States intelligence community, from outside the United States intelligence community, and they still made the decision to ignore all of that, go with what Israel said, the government of Israel's intelligence assessment, and this is why we're here. When it comes to munitions, the thing that people need to understand is when you're trying to knock down something that's already been shot into the air thousands of feet, you have to shoot more than one interceptor to have a probability of kill to knock it down. So you're taking $10,000 drones, flying them all over the place, and you have multi-million-dollar interceptors times 2, times 3, times 4, going after that one. That's why the math doesn't work. You're supposed to knock down the important ones first, Ken, and then figure out a way to take out the archers or the ones that shot them in the first place, not keep knocking them down. We did not do that, and that's why we're in the situation we're in now.
Meanwhile, we are refusing to listen to Ukraine, which has figured out how to do this economically, at least for everything but the ballistics. And when it comes to the ballistics, we have cut them off. I think 17 were launched at Kyiv this week.
Mhm.
And without those PAC 3s, they can't be shot down. And to those who say, well, we ought to be keeping them for ourselves. Listen, the answer to me is simple. Would we rather the Ukrainians shoot down ballistic missiles, Russian ballistic missiles,
Right.
over Ukraine, or have us have to do it over an American city or over a US base? The Ukrainians, this is now a global conflict.
It
I
is.
won't say
It
a
is.
world war yet, but it is a global conflict in that it involves Ukraine, it involves China's threats against Taiwan, it involves the Houthis, obviously the Strait of Hormuz. This is exactly what we've been warning about
Mhm.
a regional conflict spiraling out of control and sucking
Mhm.
in other parts of the world.
I 100% agree with you, Ken, and matter of fact, I'll take it a step further. This is the most deep February 28th is the most destabilizing event in human history since 9/11.
Hmm.
Because when you look at the residual and domino effect of this is not contained to the United States and Iran. This is now the Middle East region. This is now Europe, and this is now Asia. Right there, back to back. You hit on it. We have four bodies of water of interest that are now in direct conflict. You have the Red Sea with the BAM. You have the Persian Gulf with the Strait of Hormuz. You have the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea.
Yeah.
All connected. Four bodies that crosses over combatant command boundaries, CENTCOM and EUCOM and PACOM, all of these different things are now overlapped to the point where here's what's amazing. China is influencing all of this and they're not firing one round. It's mind boggling. They have laid back patiently. They're watching Russia provide intel to Iran. They're watching the Shahed drones being made at mass production. And all they're doing is just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, waiting for the dust to settle. You have reports of the Undersecretary of Defense who talks all this smack about China wanting to go talk to him. China's like, you're not coming over here. We have nothing to say to you. We have no diplomatic outreach because of something that we self-selected to do. This is mind blowing. The fact that Congress is not calling emergency hearings right now because they are not aware of how significant these events are in the strategic picture is scary. It's really scary, Ken, and I don't know how we get out of it.
China is also profiting handsomely. They are buying Russian oil at a deep discount because the
Yep.
Russians are having trouble finding other
Yep.
markets for it. They are selling drone components uh, to to buyers who need them by the literal millions. China is making out like bandits on our stupid behavior and our total lack of geopolitical strategy. I want to get back to your observation about this administration's inability to understand its adversary, like its racism towards, or
Yes.
American racism towards the Japanese in World
Yep.
War II, thinking they
Yep.
couldn't fight, toward Black Americans in World War II, thinking they couldn't fly. Their refusal to understand the enemy, be it Iran or the Houthis. Uh, I mean, it. I guess it's characteristic American hubris, but it explains a lot when they are surprised that the Iranians have figured out how to close the strait. America has done the same thing with our friends. The inability to understand the fighting spirit of the Ukrainian
There it
led
is.
to so much
There
blood
it is.
and suffering. If we could just back them the way they've earned, that war would have been over by now. No question there. But any comment?
No, I agree. Look, I'll put it very simple. This administration would completely fail AP World History. They would. They
Yeah.
would fail it, and they would score a 0 on the exam. If those of y'all who know how that works, they wouldn't score, and that should terrify everybody because what you just laid out, Ken, is historical record. The Ukrainians were the heart of the Soviet Union. Their innovation, the mindset to kick ass, take names, it's uniquely Ukrainian. Uniquely. And Putin recognizes it, which is why he wants it desperately. But when you are dealing with people that barely know where these places are on a map, let alone the history that's attached, what happens is the American myth machine permeates your thoughts. You believe, oh, they all live in sand, they're simple people, or they're all in this section of Europe. That's not the sophisticated part of Europe, so they can't do this, that, and the other. All you've got to do is just look up one story in Ukraine in World War II, and that goes out the window. Or, the Japanese, oh, they're over here whining about, weapons, and we need to give them tomahawks, and they, blah, blah, blah. Did you understand what the Japanese did at one point in their history? It's unbelievable to me that we have a president. The Japanese prime minister says she's never setting foot on American soil again.
Yeah.
That is our biggest ally in Asia. This was all because of him, right? When you are sitting there and Ukraine is like, we will build the weapons, just give us the license.
Yeah.
It's like James Brown said, I don't want a hand up. I want a hand that opens a door. I'll get it myself. Right. And that's what Zelensky has been doing since this thing started. And the tip of the Sunday for me, when I look at Pete Hegseth and the things that he goes on camera and does those curated videos about, the culture war stuff, but
Yeah.
yet he poof disappears like a magician when asked about munitions, strategy, the feeding the force, all of these basics, he's gone. He's ghost.
Yeah.
That's the epitome of cowardice. It's what it
Cowardice.
is. And he's the person that's supposed to be leading all this. This is ridiculous. It's
Yep.
ridiculous.
And his almost pathological lying. I look, not a psychologist. I
Yeah.
think Trump is a pathological liar, but to meet with families of the fallen and then lie about what they said, that takes a special kind of shamelessness that I think is becoming a requirement
Yep.
in this
Yep.
administration. But I haven't seen that in certainly in my entire military career or since, lying about what families of the fallen said to you, which Pete Hegseth did and Trump repeated.
That is why I go after him like a rabid dog. Like I refuse. It's just being a vet, president of Veterans for Responsible Leadership, whatever. How dare you take the grief of those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. And every time I see a casket come home, not the dignified transfer, no, when they fly the guy or girl back to their
Yeah.
hometown and they have to unload the casket with the American flag, and you have the family crying over the casket, and this son of a bitch has the nerve and audacity to put words in their mouth. I lose my mind. I lose my mind as someone who has buried classmates, teammates that I served with, shipmates. You don't get to do that. And yet at the same time, you cannot answer the question, why is USS Abraham Lincoln going through what they're going through right now? Or why did USS Gerald Ford, where sailors were sleeping on the deck, on the floor for months, 600 of them, couldn't even use the restroom in their own facility. But you can't answer those questions. But you can magically tell us, poof, what these fallen service members were saying before they died and what their families were saying afterwards, because that's what Trump did and Hegseth did, respectively. I just, it's the arrogance of this. And that is what is our undoing in this situation. It comes down to one word: arrogance. Arrogance that you believe as an American, you're better than the Iranians. Arrogance that believes, well, white men are better soldiers and sailors than any other demographic. The arrogance of believing because we have these expensive weapons that the Iranians will cower. The arrogance that comes to the whole mentality of who you think should serve and who can't or shouldn't. It's all about arrogance, and pride goeth before the fall. This
Yep.
is where we are, and it's happening in real time.
All of that. I promised Linda we'd get to the new question. This
Yeah.
is a tough one, and a little background here. I was part of the in the military, they call it the continuity of operations system. There are a few platforms that will deploy in the event of all-out nuclear war to make sure our government survives. That's called continuity of operations. I have some familiarity with that. And the bottom line is, at least by statute, the American president has the ability to unilaterally
Yep.
launch nukes because speed is of the essence. And since the National Command Authority and the attendant legislation and the advent of like mutual assured destruction, speed was the priority. And you had to have if a Russian boomer, a ballistic missile submarine launches off the coast, you have minutes to
Mhm.
respond. So there are very few checks and balances. Really, the only one is the conscience of that key turner. That's
That's it.
probably the
That's it.
the only link in the chain, and
That's it.
that is a scary scenario. Bobby?
Well, It's funny you say that because you bring up such a valid point about the speed of this. And when people are talking about President Trump, as far as his mental fitness, to me, this is the number one argument for the 25th Amendment.
Mm,
Has nothing to do with your domestic policies, has nothing to do with you arguing about Congress and voting, blah, blah. It has everything to do with what you just said. He is the unitary person that makes the decision on this. He can unilaterally make that decision and it will happen in seconds, literally, if that's what he chooses to do. This is why you need to be of right mind. Because what if he happens to see a tweet or a news report that just sets him off? Based on who's now in the chain of command, Hegseth, Kane, all of these people, who's going to tell him no? Who's going to stop him? This is the problem with how this is set up. But we have these fail safes, 25th Amendment, the key integrity, who does this, that, and the other. But you're right. It may come down to some, I don't know, 30-year-old lieutenant who may be like, are we seriously going to start nuclear Armageddon? And it's on that person. And this is why I tell people, don't blame the military for this. Blame yourselves. We put these people in power, and these things have consequences. As a matter of fact, I would argue that there have probably been orders that have happened throughout this campaign that someone in the military told civilian leadership no. Matter of fact, we
mm.
know that's happened, right? So don't come looking at the military. You need to turn and look at yourselves in the mirror and be like, what am I doing to get civilian leadership where it needs to go? If you're not calling your congressman asking, have y'all done a mental fitness check on the president of the United States? Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. I'm just saying. So the nuclear thing is always a possibility with the current people in power. I would love to say, no, that's far. How do we know? The whole tactical nuke thing that he brought up when he came back in office, and people who don't know, there was a time in the United States arsenal, we had nukes that could be shoulder mounted and launched. It had like a couple of
Artillery.
mile
Yeah.
radius. Yeah,
That's wild.
artillery, right? Man came into office for the second time talking about these for the first time in 50 years because we got rid of it in our arsenal. This is unbelievable when you think about it. This is not, a game of Super Soaker or with water balloons and stuff. This is nuclear war that's mobile that they brought up for the first
Yeah.
time in decades, right? So I don't know, Ken. I don't think it will happen, but Lord knows it is definitely a possibility.
Last question for you, related when it comes to regime change in our country and installing a civilian leadership that actually meets its obligations to the Constitution and does right by the troops deployed. How is VFRL, that's for responsible leadership, looking at the map
Mhm.
for November? I know you had some wins in the primaries. How are you feeling about the midterms?
We feel relatively good. We have endorsed people that are still in the fight. They made it through a primary. Some of the ones that we really wanted barely lost, but
Yeah.
I think that's just a chapter for them and not the final closing book. I will say this: I think the margins of victory come November will be smaller than people think, but I do think, and this is the key thing: the United States Senate is fully in play now. We are looking to amplify voices of people who give a damn about their country, their countrymen, and humanity at large. And most of them are all vets or associated like dependents or have served in government service. And let me tell you why that's important. It's one thing to sit there and talk the talk. It's another thing to completely have to walk the walk, get knocked down, stand back up, and keep walking. Those are the people that we are trying to endorse. That is the epitome in my mind of the American spirit. And the number one thing all of our endorsed candidates have in common, if you go to our website, vfrl.org, you'll see they are all selfless people. They understand it's not about them. They have spent the prime years of their lives doing stuff for other people. The thing that I need America to do, you guys watching, you guys who will see this, is ask yourself a very simple question. What can I do? It doesn't have to be Herculean. It can be going and making a phone call at a phone bank. It can be, hey, putting a sign in your yard. It can be having a discussion. But I need you to do one thing every day, just one little thing every day that proactively says we have to do better. Not that we can do better. We know that. We have to do better because here's the thing. that I will leave everybody with. If you are a 18, 19-year-old young American right now, based on what's happening right here, right now, how would you feel about your future? Because the people arguing about all of this are the people who've already pretty much established themselves and had a pretty decent life. But for those who are 18, 19, and you're like, oh, they're apathetic, you would be too. If you look around the world and see this crap happening, that, hey, no matter if I go to college or work hard, I'm not going to be able to buy a house at 25, 26. I'm not going to be able to do all these things. Oh, and by the way, I could get drafted to go fight a war. I have no idea. If you were them, you would be pissed off too. So ask yourself, what are we doing to make it better for them and those behind them? That's all I want you to do. That's all I want you to ask. And try to do one thing every day. Lord knows I try. Some days are hard. Some days are hard. Some of these people, woo, they try me. But you do what you can. You do what you can.
Very well said, Bobby. Everyone, make sure you check out VFRL.org, help them out. Subscribe to Anchor Watch, Bobby's Substack, Midas Plus, and the Ken Harbaugh Show. And I'll see you back here on Monday with Scott McFarland. And Bobby and I are every Friday at the same
Yep.
time. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.